Sessions being viciously attacked by the family pet, a 103-pound male Rottweiler, as Jamaria was just out of frame. However, Tyshale Martin could be seen holding the leash of the dog and is heard encouraging the dog to bite Jamaria Sessions as Jamaria laid on the floor.
The world needs to know evil when they see it, so her picture needs to be everywhere.
In the quiet town of Monteverde, Florida, a horrific crime shattered the community's sense of safety. On June 17, 2023, emergency responders rushed to a call about an unresponsive child. What they discovered would haunt them for years to come. 9-year-old Jamaria Sessions lay motionless, her small body covered in bruises, burns, and bite marks. The paramedics worked frantically to revive her, but it was too late. As the sun rose over Lake County that day, a little girl's life had been brutally extinguished. This wasn't a random act of violence. The person responsible for Jamaria's death had been hiding in plain sight, masquerading as a loving caregiver. As investigators would soon discover, the truth behind Jamaria's final moments was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of a child failed by those meant to protect her, a community left reeling, and the relentless pursuit of justice for an innocent life cut tragically short.
That's a baby. That's a baby. A beautiful little girl not gone.
Of a 9-year-old baby.
The 911 call came in at 4:52 a.m. on June 17, 2023. A woman's panicked voice crackled over the line.
My child is not. She's not breathing, and she's swollen, and she's not responding.
The dispatcher tried to remain calm, guiding the caller through CPR.
She's not responding.
I understand, but this is the best we can do right now till they arrive. You're doing fantastic. This is helping.
But when paramedics arrived at the home on Harbor Oaks Drive, they knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. 9-year-old Jamaria Sessions showed no signs of life. Her skin was cold to the touch. Covering her small body were numerous abrasions, bruises, burns, and possible bite marks. Lieutenant John Harrell of the Lake County Sheriff's Office arrived on the scene shortly after. In his years of law enforcement, he had never encountered a case quite like this, as he would later state.
I don't have the words to describe it. It's unimaginable and completely inhumane.
As crime scene technicians combed the house for evidence, detectives began the grim task of piecing together Jamaria's final hours. But to understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to go back, to trace the path that led an innocent child into the hands of her abusers. Jamaria Sessions was born on May 9, 2014, to parents Lowan Sessions and Tadrina Dort. From the beginning, her life was marked by instability. Her father had a lengthy criminal record, including drug trafficking and child neglect charges. Her mother battled leukemia for years before passing away when Jamaria was young. After her mother's death, Jamaria and her younger sister lived with their maternal grandmother, Althea Chanot. But in late 2022, Lojuan Sessions picked the girls up from school one day and never returned them to their grandmother's care. Instead, Jamaria found herself living in a new home in Monteverde with her father and his girlfriend, 34-year-old blended family. She referred to Jamaria as her bonus daughter and posted loving messages about the girl. But behind closed doors, a very different reality was unfolding. Neighbors would later recall frequent visits from animal control and law enforcement to the Sessions Martin home, and inside the house, a sophisticated security camera system captured the horrific abuse Jamaria endured in her final weeks of life. When detectives executed a search warrant on the Harbor Oaks Drive home, they uncovered a chilling surveillance system that would reveal the full extent of Jamaria's nightmare. Throughout the house, an extensive network of security cameras had been installed, silently recording the unspeakable horrors inflicted on this innocent 9-year-old girl. As investigators began combing through hours of footage, the true depth of Jamaria's suffering came into sharp, heartbreaking focus. Video after video showed Tyshale Martin subjecting the child to brutal physical and psychological that would make even the toughest officers struggle to watch. Martin forced Jamaria to endure grueling exercises for what seemed like endless hours. The cameras captured the exhausted child struggling to maintain wall sits, her small legs quivering with fatigue. In other clips, Jamaria ran in place, her arms raised high above her head as sweat poured down her face. But any moment of weakness or faltering was met with swift and violent punishment. When Jamaria's strength finally gave out, Martin's cruelty only intensified. The footage showed her viciously the child, landing punches on her small body and cruelly pinching her skin. The level of abuse was shocking, but it was about to get even worse. Just 2 days before Jamaria's tragic death, the cameras captured a scene so horrifying that it left the detectives shaken. Lieutenant Harrell, his voice tight with barely contained anger, described the nightmarish footage.
Security cameras in the home not only captured physical abuse, but at one point, Sessions being viciously attacked by the family pet, a 103-pound male Rottweiler, as Jamaria was just out of frame. However, Tyshale Martin could be seen holding the leash of the dog and is heard encouraging the dog to Jamaria Sessions as Jamaria laid on the floor.
The video showed Martin wielding the leash of her massive 103-pound Rottweiler like a weapon. Jamaria, clearly terrified and already from previous abuse, lay helplessly on the floor. With a sickening realization, investigators watched as Martin deliberately commanded the dog to attack the defenseless child. As the powerful Rottweiler lunged at Jamaria, its jaws clamping down on her small body, Martin's voice could be heard in the background. Instead of stopping the attack, she actively encouraged the animal, spurring it on to inflict even more damage. But it was her next words that truly revealed the depths of her evil intentions.
In one video, Martin is heard saying, "I'm fixin' to kill her."
Those 5 chilling words sent shockwaves through the investigation team. This wasn't just abuse. It was a calculated, cold-blooded attempt to end a child's life. For the detectives working on the case, the security footage provided irrefutable proof of Martin's guilt. The videos painted a horrifying picture of sustained torture and a clear intent to cause serious harm, if not death. But as they pieced together the timeline of abuse, troubling questions began to surface. Where was Jamaria's father, Lojuan Sessions, during all of this brutality? How could he have been unaware of the extreme violence happening in his own home? The cameras seemed to be everywhere. Surely he must have seen something. Even more disturbing was the realization of how long this abuse had likely been going on. The sheer number of videos suggested that Jamaria's torment had stretched over a significant period. This raised alarming questions about the systems meant to protect vulnerable children. How had this level of sustained abuse gone undetected by teachers, neighbors, or child protective services? As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Jamaria had been failed by nearly every adult in her life. The security cameras that should have kept her safe had instead become silent witnesses to her suffering. Now, they would serve as damning evidence to bring her abusers to justice. But for Jamaria, it was already too late. As the tragic news of Jamaria's death spread through the community, people were left grappling with a mix of shock, grief, and mounting anger. How could such a horrific situation have gone unnoticed? Why hadn't anyone stepped in to protect this innocent child? Jamaria's grandmother, Althea Chanot, was absolutely heartbroken. She had been fighting tooth and nail to gain custody of her granddaughters ever since Lojuan Sessions had taken them away. Now, it was too late, and her pain was palpable. In a tearful statement to the press, she cried out,
That's a baby. That's a baby. A beautiful little girl now gone.
Of a 9-year-old baby.
As more details emerged about Tyshale Martin's background, a disturbing pattern began to take shape. Court records revealed a troubling incident from 2016 where Martin had been charged with failure to control an animal resulting in a bite. While this case was eventually dismissed, it hinted at something far more sinister, the possibility that Martin was deliberately training dogs to be used as weapons. Neighbors reported hearing aggressive barking coming from the property at all hours. Some even claimed to have seen Martin working with the dogs in the backyard, using harsh commands and rough handling. Was she actually trying to turn these animals into instruments of fear and control? The thought sent shivers down the spines of those living nearby. But the red flags didn't stop there. Lojuan Sessions, Jamaria's father, had a criminal history that should have raised serious questions about his fitness as a parent. His rap sheet included convictions for drug trafficking, fleeing from law enforcement, and, most alarmingly, child neglect. In a particularly shocking incident from 2016, Sessions had even been arrested for attempted murder after firing a gun into a crowd during an argument. Given this troubling background, how on earth had Sessions been granted custody of his daughters in the first place? The answer was as infuriating as it was heartbreaking. Sessions had gone behind Jamaria's grandmother's back, showing up at the girls' school one day and simply taking them. The school, unaware of the custody battle brewing, had allowed allowed him to leave with the children. As these disturbing details came to light, the community's outrage reached a boiling point. People demanded answers and action from law enforcement. How could a man with Sessions' history of violence and neglect be allowed to care for vulnerable children? Why hadn't Child Protective Services intervened? The pressure on authorities to make an arrest mounted with each passing day. Finally, on August 30th, 2023, more than 2 months after Jamaria's tragic death, they acted. But for many in the community, this arrest felt like too little, too late. A precious life had been lost, and the systems meant to protect children like Jamaria had failed spectacularly. Taishael Martin was taken into custody without incident at her mother's home in Monteverde. She was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. At her first court appearance, Martin appeared emotionless as the charges were read. When asked if she intended to be represented by a state-appointed attorney, she replied simply,
"I already have a private attorney."
You have a private attorney? Okay.
Given the severity of the charges, Martin was held without bond. If convicted of first-degree murder, she could face life in prison or even the death penalty. But for many in the community, Martin's arrest wasn't enough. They wanted to know why it had taken so long for charges to be filed, and they demanded accountability for others they felt had failed Jamaria, including her father. Those calls for justice would soon be answered. On September 1st, 2023, just days after Martin's arrest, the Lake County Sheriff's Office announced new charges in the case. This time, the target was Lojuan Sessions himself.
He had a first appearance in Lake County Tuesday on a charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child.
How could a father, meant to protect his children, become complicit in such horrific child abuse? This question haunts us as we delve into the shocking case of Lojuan Sessions and the tragic fate of his daughter, Jamaria. Sessions was arrested and charged with aggravated manslaughter of a child, a crime that seems unthinkable for a parent. But the evidence uncovered by investigators painted a disturbing picture of a father who not only knew about the abuse his daughter suffered, but actively encouraged it. Text messages between Sessions and his partner Martin revealed a twisted dynamic. They joked about the brutal discipline inflicted on Jamaria, calling it boot camp, and discussing ways to create a torturous environment for the child. It's hard to imagine how a parent could speak this way about their own flesh and blood. As the detectives on the case explained,
detectives say he knew his daughter was being abused by Martin and did nothing to prevent or report it.
How could a father, whose instinct should be to shield his child from harm, instead become a willing participant in her suffering? Sessions wasn't home on the night Jamaria died, having traveled to California days earlier, but his absence didn't excuse him in the eyes of the law. The detectives working on the case explained that Sessions knew about the ongoing abuse by Martin and did absolutely nothing to stop it or report it to authorities, so that makes him culpable. As both Martin and Sessions face legal consequences for their actions, those who love Jamaria are left to grapple with an overwhelming sense of loss and injustice. No punishment can truly make up for the life of an innocent child, cut terribly short by those who should have cherished and protected her most. As the case against Taishael Martin and Lojuan Sessions moved through the legal system, disturbing new details continued to emerge. The full autopsy report, released in late August, painted a horrific picture of Jamaria's final days. Medical examiners concluded that the cause of death was complications of multiple blunt injuries of head, torso, and extremities. But it wasn't just the fatal injuries that told the story of Jamaria's suffering. Her body bore evidence of long-term systematic abuse. Scars and bruises in various stages of healing covered much of her skin, burns on her right foot, bite marks matching the jaw structure of a large dog, signs of malnutrition and dehydration. For the detectives who had worked tirelessly on the case, the autopsy findings only strengthened their resolve to see justice done. They were determined to ensure that Jamaria's voice would be heard loud and clear in the courtroom. The case of Jamaria Sessions shocked a nation and devastated a community. It exposed failures at every level of the system meant to protect children from abuse, and it forced us to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. But amidst the horror, there were also moments of light. The tireless work of investigators to uncover the truth, the outpouring of support from a grieving believing community, and the renewed commitment to protecting vulnerable children born from the ashes of tragedy. Jamaria's life was cut tragically short, but her story lives on in the lives touched by her memory and in our collective resolve to never let such a failure happen again. For Jamaria and for all the children still suffering in silence, we must remain vigilant. We must speak up when we suspect abuse, and we must never stop fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. Because in the end, the true measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members, and we owe it to Jamaria's memory to do better. Thank you for listening to this tragic story. If you suspect a child is being abused, please don't hesitate to contact the authorities. Your action could save a life. As we wrap up, remember to stay vigilant and care for those around you. If you've enjoyed this content, please take a moment to like and subscribe before you go. Until next time, take care and stay safe.